Hello everyone, my name is Civic Extraordinaire, and I am taking another look at starting locations for Civilization 6. I know I did a video a few months ago, but with the channel increasingly growing, I felt that the last video for my initial starting locations was a bit lackluster, and I wanted to redo the video, so to say, with a few more insights. So this will essentially be a rehash of that video, and I will be taking a look at one more starting location, as well as making sure to do the starting locations with a neutral civ, and by neutral I mean a civilization like Rome, which does not have any particular start bias. I think other neutral civs or civilizations with no particular start biases are civilizations like Arabia. And just to give you guys a basic view on some fairly unique starts with some of these common civs, so let's just get right into the video. Okay, so first things first, with Rome, I would suggest, or just with any civilization in general, always at least scout the periphery or surrounding area with your warrior, because you do want to find things like tribal goody huts, which can give you a boost, ranging from things like an additional +1 population or even some Eurekas and inspirations. But for this particular start, it is not necessarily a good one, just because my only source of fresh water is a lake, and I can see that there is some tundra to the south of me, and tundra is slightly better than desert, but neither are preferable. And unfortunately, with base game civs like Rome, which tend to have very neutral start biases, you might get clustered in between some less desirable territory. But I'm not too sure which direction is more valuable. I mean, they're equally quite a bit crippling. So my general idea, because I don't have too much of a big view of the surrounding area, is to go ahead and move Rome in the right direction. So my gamble actually paid off, because I do have the Fountain of Youth here, which does change things up quite a bit. For example, if I originally planned to settle here, I would have a lot of food early on, but I might be struggling for production. I do have that +2 food and +2 production tile here, but aside from that, I am a bit lacking on production. Now, this would be quite a good start with Lady of the Reeds and Marshes, which means I would get a +2 production to each of these marshes, and that would improve that would improve the city fairly early on. But that is assuming I do snag that Pantheon. So I'm going to go to the next turn, and we can, of course, send our warrior up here. And I'm going to want to send him as far as I can just to get a better surveillance of the area. And then I am actually going to change my plans and settle on top of the luxury right here. So I will be taking 2 turns, and I will be settling a bit closer to the tundra. But the Fountain of Youth not only provides fresh water, but I also have the woods up here to work. And I'm going to want that early production to help me get a bit of a head start. And then after that, I can go ahead and move on to the orange. And I have this nice little production here, this production tile here. So it's not necessarily an amazing start, but I do have the Fountain of Youth to work immediately later on. And that's basically, I think, the gist of this start particularly. One other thing to note is that I am also getting an additional amenity, which is very nice, especially if you are playing with civs that require or give you a lot of pops, like the Inca. So that additional amenity is pretty potent. As Rome, it's not as effective because I will be building a lot of baths, but still, that additional amenity is something to keep in mind. Also, you can use it to trade on early with the AI for gold, which will help significantly if you are playing against higher level opponents like with Deity or Immortal. So this is the second start I rolled with Rome. As you can see, I am starting next to a river this time, but the resources are not as plentiful and I am a bit closer to the desert. First things first, as always, is to take a close look with my warrior to see the surrounding areas. Now, the area to my right is fairly flat, but just for the sake of future starting locations, it may be valuable to get a good look at that, but I'm also interested to see what is to the south here. Okay, and that is actually fairly helpful because we not only see that to the south we have an ocean, but also that we have some fairly plentiful resources to work with here. To the right is actually fairly barren, so I'm kind of glad I took a look over here with the warrior. And the start over here is really not too good. I mean, if I settled here, I would be getting a +2 food, +2 production capital, but I would not have that much to work with. These are fairly crappy tiles to be next to, and that desert is fairly punishing. So I think what I want to do with my warrior is move over to the olives and see what I have to work with over here. We've also revealed amber. So the left side of the map here is actually not as punishing as the right. And although this is not really a good starting location, it's probably best to settle in place and then crank out a few, at least a few builders and settlers later on, and then found some better cities. So I think with that in mind, it's probably best to settle here, and then I can build some baths here and make use of Rome's unique aqueduct, which will provide additional amenities and housing to kind of help even out the start. So I just want to explore just a little bit more and see if I could have made any better decisions. I think early on, at least settling further away from the desert, if you're not like Mali, or unless you have a particularly good preserve spot, is the most optimal situation. And I'm just taking another peek here. Okay, yeah, and we have a lot of olives as Rome, so very historically accurate, but we will have the cows to work with, which is really nice, as our second ring. And overall, this is not too good of a start. I would probably rank this like a 5 out of 10, or maybe even a 4 out of 10 compared to the last start, because at least we had Roraima, or the Fountain of Youth. Sorry about that. But yeah, the start, not particularly too good. Alright, so now we have our third and final start, and it is looking a lot better than our last start. Just overall, it is looking much better, and then I'll explain why fairly quickly. But I think first things first, let's quickly, or speedily rather, move our warrior out and see what we have to work with. As this is gathering storm, we have some interesting floodplains which will undoubtedly flood and grant us some additional yields depending on our difficulty or the disaster setting. So that will also be a boon, which kind of raises this start just a little bit in terms of my rankings. But also, we have a very nice start because we are on top of a jungle hill, which means we will be keeping the +2 food and +2 production when we settle, which is not always the case. For example, if I settled on the floodplains here, I would be getting +2 food and +1 production. So that additional production, while it might not seem much, will help out a lot, at least early on, when pumping out some scouts and pumping out some warriors. So this spice is also very nice. I don't think I'll be settling on it, just because I can immediately work the sugar and spice. I have both options available to me, and I would not be getting the housing bonus, which is a little bit of a factor. Probably not as big as a deal with Rome, since they have pretty good baths, which provide additional housing and amenities, like I said before. But I also want to keep this stone in mind early on, because once I build a mine on top of that, that will give me +2 production. And I think just in general, settling on the spices early on might not be a good idea, because I don't know, I am a bit further away from that sugar for the additional pop. So I will, of course, settle in place there. And I just want to see what we have to go forward with for our warrior. This start in particular is pretty nice just because of the mountain as well, which will give us an okay campus early on. And we can probably grab a +2 campus here. And I think the fish will also not be too bad. Some of these coastal resources are okay, but what I'm really liking about the start is the sugar and the spices, which will also each give me +1 amenity when I build a plantation on top of them. And they could potentially help me out with oral tradition, which gives me additional culture on top of plantations. Thank you guys for checking out my little video, and I hope this helps you with your starting locations, as well as helping you just get a better understanding of how these different yields interact with each other and the most optimal place to settle your capital. Thank you guys again for watching my video, and if you liked this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on future content.